I just want to make sure this is good. Okay, great. Hi, guys. Just making sure everything, I look on the camera, I'm in the right position. Okay, great. Hi, guys. Welcome to SAMIF. For those of you who don't know what this is, it stands for Science and Metaphysics in Film. If you like metaphysics and science and you're not in film, that is perfectly okay too for this event. So this up there will just say more about what we are. I created this because, one, I need more friends, and two, I wanted to create a community of like-minded people who want to make awesome sci-fi movies and learn more about the world of science and metaphysics. And I also, just like probably everyone else, want to help change the world and raise the consciousness. So I thought this would be a really cool way to start with like-minded people. One moment. I don't have someone to change the slide for me. So our first guest will be Shaman. I'm sure most of you know who he is, but for those of you who don't, you can read up here. He is a 6th-generation shaman and author of the best-selling book, Spirit Hacking, Shamanic Keys to Reclaim Your Personal Power, Transform Your Life, and Light Up the World. He is a visionary of the now age with a strong focus on the evolution of humanity while also simplifying our experience through common sense practices. I will now show you guys a 3-minute video that encompasses this event, and then I will introduce Shaman, and you won't have to hear from me anymore. Thank you. Oh, and our next guest, who is awesome too, I'm not going to introduce him yet, but will be Dr. Benjamin Gross, who is a biophysicist and a mathematics teacher, and that will be awesome. So, yes. So I'm Dana Kiffel. I am a filmmaker and writer, and I'm passionate about this stuff because I feel like science and metaphysics has saved my life. When I've been in dark areas, this has been the one thing that I love and has helped me with a lot of self-growth and empowerment, and I apply it to every part of my life. I also love studying science and plasma physics, and I write a lot of my scripts and that incorporate these things that we're going to learn today. So that's about me, and I will get Shaman direct. Everyone, Shaman direct.
Thank you.
Sorry, just before I do this more. I already introduced you, but I'll do it again. Shaman Direct is a sixth-generation shaman, author of the best-selling books Spirit Hacking, Shamanic Keys to Reclaim Your Personal Power, Transform Yourself, and Light Up the World. He is also a visionary of the now age with a strong focus on the evolution of humanity, while also simplifying our experience through common sense practices. And if you would just like to talk a little bit about what you do, for people who don't know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm Shaman Durek. I'm sixth generation shaman, and I've spent my life understanding human adaptability, how we focus in ourselves and how we focus outside of ourselves to create a collective resurgence for our planet. So a lot of my work has been studying world religion, traveling around the world, living in different cultures, understanding conflicts, being in war zones, dealing with those level of conflicts. But mostly it's about putting the power back in people's hands. It's about making people sufficient and able to understand how to adapt and how to thrive on this planet in a system that has not been built for the purpose of us to be able to have that type of autonomy or liberation. So a lot of my focus has been working with different doctors, working with different people from every walk of life to understand the ways that we operate in sociology, understanding the levels of anthropology, and how we developed ourselves and how we can go from here to create a new understanding of what it means to be an intelligent human being. Yeah, we can do that. We can do all fun stuff. Absolutely. Let's see. Who wants to experience? All right. Yeah, come up.
You can introduce yourself. Yeah.
I'm Kumasi from Compton, California. Just a big admirer of Shaman and from Flyer to be presence and I'm aware of what he does. I ordered the SO. Was hoping to come. He has a spirit optimizer. I was hoping to carry in the mail so I could have it here when met him, but I'm just excited to be here.
Well, I'm happy you're here as well, and I'm happy that everyone else is here. Okay, so I don't know if this is light. Do I have to be over here? Do I have to stand over here?
Yeah, stand over there.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm like, I'm going into the dark again. Okay, so one of the things that we as human beings, since we've been born, one of the major factors that shamans look at in how we develop and how we evolve on the planet is how much we have connectivity to the understandings of the elements and the energy that is constantly moving through us. Now, most people don't realize that our bodies is made up of all these different types of intelligences that are happening simultaneously. We're only aware of what we learned in school about your brain, about different organs, the functioning of them, what foods to eat, what foods not to eat, and even that was a lie. And, you know, and then also how do we associate ourselves with each other on the planet. But what they don't talk about is the core energies that are inside of you that have the ability to communicate very quickly to any type of field of consciousness. So what we're going to do, one of the most important areas of the body, we say in shamanism, is called the bowl. And this is in African shamanism. It's very different in different types of shamanism, from Peruvian and so forth. And for those of you who don't know, I'm a spirit shaman. So there's different shamans. There's earth shamans, water shamans, fire shamans, air shamans, and spirit shamans. I'm a spirit shaman. So my focus and energy is about understanding the spirit world, how it connects with us, and how we connect with it. So your abdomen is known as the bowl, and you have your belly button, right, which is where your umbilical cord is, right? But most people don't know that that's considered a stargate in African culture. It is actually a powerful source of energy that connects you to higher intelligence, but not the intelligence of what you would learn in school or something you'd pick up in a book. It's the intelligence of the universal field of intelligence, which is operating on a quantum level. So the key element in shamanism is to cover your navel. So you cover it. And the reason why you cover it is because this world is affecting you by all of these different frequencies and technologies and things that actually were not meant to be connected to our bodies. So we're constantly picking up on all these frequencies, and this part of your body is the most important one to be able to shut that out, because when you shut that out here, you're able to access your power at a higher dimensional level. Now, without all the woo-woo nonsense that people like to always go, oh, it's so woo-woo, right? It's actually really scientific. So covering your navel, and what I want you to do is say, and I'm just going to sit here, I want you to say force fields up.
Force fields up.
Okay, why is he saying force fields up? Because what he's doing is he's activating through voice command his own energy intelligence. Now say force field, show me the energies that move through my body, create a sensation.
Force field, show me the energies that move through my body, create a sensation.
And then tell me when you feel it. And what are you sensing in your body?
I'm definitely focusing on waiting on a sensation, and to make, I guess I'll feel something moving in my midsection back in stomach.
Right, so that is a sensation.
Yes.
Right, so this is what happens in our world. We are being bombarded by so much outward activity. We have what is called an analytical mind. An analytical mind is trying to understand the spirit world the way it understands this world. This world is completely different from the spirit world. So he felt something in his body, but he's looking for something else. He's like, okay, where is this thing gonna be? Where is it gonna feel like? That's what's going on in his brain. His body's already communicating to him the sensation. So I want you to say, force field, increase it and make it stronger.
Force field, increase it and make it stronger.
And now what's happening?
What's happening is, it was in my, it's in my head, as opposed to my midsection, and that's where the strength is strengthening.
Okay, now I want you to say, force field, make it warm in my body.
Force field, make it warm in my body.
And what are you feeling?
Feel a sensation like being gay, but internally.
Now say, force field, I want you to show me yes, lean me forward or backwards.
Force field, I want you to show me yes, lean me forward or backward.
So what happened just now?
For me, it was as if I lost balance, like got a little dizzy to be able to fall backwards.
Okay, now say, force field, show me no, forward or backwards.
Force field, show me no, forward or backwards.
What did that feel like to you?
That was nice. It felt like a push, and it was very prevalent.
Say, force field, show me where there is a portal of energy in this room and lean me in that direction.
Force field, show me where there's a portal of energy in this room and lead me to that direction.
What are you feeling right there?
I don't know if I'm feeling, but the sensation is really essence with, push forward and a guide, push and turn.
So we have portals all over the place. Different portals do different things. Your body knows where everyone is. Your body also knows where to find water. Your body also knows where danger is going to be. Your intelligence is so smart, it knows every single thing that you need. All you have to do is tap into your source. Come back here. Did I tell you to walk over there?
Negative.
Say, force field,
Force field.
bring up a memory of a time where I felt the greatest joy.
Bring up a memory of a time where I felt the greatest joy.
And tell me when you have it.
I have it.
Force field, bring up the emotions of that time.
Force field, bring up the emotions of that time.
Do you see how clear that was?
Absolutely, yes.
Do you think depression is real? Or do you think it's real because you don't understand it? Or any other emotion you go through? Most of the time, human beings just accept whatever is being presented to them without actually understanding it because you're told to, because you were raised in a system that gave you one form of thinking, which is follow your authority figures, do as they tell you to do. If you don't get love, you don't get acknowledged, you don't get rewarded, you don't get seen. There's so many things that are moving through you all the time, communicating to you all the time. You just don't realize it because you've been taught to obey this world. Shamans are around to remind you that this isn't the only world that exists, and you are not here to be a slave. You are not here to follow rules and do as you're told to do in some domesticated way. You are here to discover yourself in all of the amazing things that you can do in the time that you're here. Please, thank you. And this is one demonstration of many demonstrations that we do. And there's so many more. And the thing is, your body, your emotions, your mind, your spirit is highly intelligent. We call it the 4 gatekeepers. And every gatekeeper has a power that moves through you that has access to the world around you. The difference is some are able to tap into it and others are not because they can't, but because they're afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of what they can't control or dominate.
Thank you. We have time for 15 minutes. Would you like to do one more demonstration and a quick Q&A, or would you like to just do a Q&A?
We can do a Q&A. We can do whatever. It doesn't matter to me. I'm open to whatever.
Does anyone else feel able to come up here?
You want to come up here? We both are talking. All right. Yes, I remember. It's a pleasure to see you as well. Hi, Shireen. Yes. Oh, nice. Yes. I love video games. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a really simple exercise, and it's just basic you learning how to connect with the elements. Okay? So go ahead and put your hand out. One hand will do. Good. And what I want you to do is say, elemental spirit, come into my hand. And then tell me what you feel. Heart racing, okay. Say, thank you, I felt that. Go up my arm. Now what's happening? Say, I felt that. Go into my chest. Merge with my power. So you're getting a visual. Okay. Okay. Say, thank you, I felt that. Say, bring electricity through my body. Say, turn up the frequency. Say, turn up the frequency higher. Download euphoria into my body. Your glutes? Or piriformis? What? Which one? Your sacrum. Say, increase euphoria in my body. Anything I'm holding on to, release it out of me. Bring your hands down. Say, release any poisons I'm holding on to that I've gathered from this world. Release it out of my mouth and throat. Now, just to give you an understanding. This is a shield here, okay? I'm going to tell you how you know the difference. A shield means I'm not going to show you my vulnerability of what's happening inside of me, so I'm going to contain it as tight as I can inside. This is a reaction to the outer world. This means that she is an acute sensitive. An acute sensitive to shamans means that she's so sensitive to the outer world that she puts up a shield to make sure that no one could use her emotions to hurt her. This one is experiencing it through her body. So instead of she's getting colors, she's getting images, situations in her body is communicating to her, but at the same time, they both have different forms of shields up. Now, give me your arm. Give me your arm. Wrist. Upper chest. Go back. And tell me when you feel your body starting to release and get relaxed. Tell me when it relaxes even more. What I just did is focus on these energy points in their body that basically take down their shield so that they can be comfortable in their body and still be vulnerable. Okay, I'm gonna say some words to you. Just listen to the words. Okay? Tree, porcupine, ocean, laughing child, fresh grass. Tell me when your body starts to laugh uncontrollably. Tell me when it gets more intense. Bathwater, sky, cloud. Tell me when you start to feel like a little kid again. Why is that happening? It's not hypnosis. It's not hypnosis. All it is using patterns of nature and certain things that are connecting to the elements of the body that activate certain parts of the human awareness that takes away the fear of allowing themselves to feel emotions that are naturally there that want to come up. Our beings naturally want to be happy. We want to be excited. We want to feel pleasure. We are pleasurable beings by nature. We're supposed to feel pleasure all the time. But the reason why we don't feel pleasure all the time is because we're constantly either one, taking responsibility for someone else's emotions, putting expectations on ourselves that weigh us down, putting pressure on ourselves because we think we have to do something in order to be something or achieve something. Everything is pressing on us, such as bills, this thing, that thing, the other, that we don't realize that we can move all of those synthesis from our system and go into the purest emotion that we want to go into at any given time. We are self-generating beings, sustainable beings that are capable of creating emotional responses. We see mental health breakdown because we don't understand how the mental health breaks down. Shamanism, the reason why different shamans will give you plant medicine or different things, it's because they're breaking down those syntheses in your body that keep those walls up so you can reach to those greater places of power within you. Thank you, ladies.
Thanks so much.
Sure.
All right, we're going to do one more, and then we will conclude this part. Does anyone, I will pick, raise your hand if you want to come up. Okay.
Okay. So, remember we talked about the physical, the emotional, mental, and spiritual. We call it Mother Nature, which is the earth, your body. Your emotions is water, which is the feminine. The masculine is fire, and the mind is spirit, which is what we call the air, the breath. Okay. So in shamanism, you have 4 pillars in your being. In order for you to reach into higher dimensions of thinking, you have to actually be able to balance those 4 pillars naturally and easily while maintaining your own structure of autonomy on this planet. That means what? That means that you need to own your own existence. Not your parents, not your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your community or society or your doctor or your lawyer or whoever it is that you think is an authority figure in your life. You need to own your own existence. Your choice to exist outside of what anyone else may think or feel about you. The difficulty on our planet in that is that we are the only species on the planet that wants to be something other than who we are, to be loved, to be liked, and to be seen, and to be valued. So we change ourselves according to how we feel, how other people feel, and how we feel that we're going to be received in this world, which means the authentic qualities of ourself is misled because all it takes is one person to come in and create enough emotional turmoil in your life that you will actually go into that turmoil in your life. But the more you are balanced in your system and the more you're able to access those gates, the more powerful you're going to be. All right, so just stand there. Good. All right, so what we're going to do is we're just going to access just an awareness of your expansion of awareness, right? And this is just simple things, stuff like Lord Siddhartha, who became Gautama Buddha, talks about, Christ talks about, like all the great people who were studying and understanding the spirit and the mind and the body and so forth. But what we're going to do is we're going to use your own body's intelligence. So take your hands like this. You're going to turn your palms towards each other. We're going to use what is called magnetic energy. Now, magnetic energy is all around us. We get it from the moon, we get it from oceans, and we get it from animals. We get it every time we connect with someone, every time we have intimacy with someone, every time we hug someone, we're building this magnetic energy. But we don't use the magnetic energy to actually access our own powers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to communicate to both your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. So physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, anything that she's holding on to that's getting in the way of her making more money, more success, more happiness in her life, I want you to start releasing it out of her body. As you release it, bring her hands together. See how her eyes are closed? This is a very interesting spiritual thing that I find fascinating. Human beings think to get to some place, they have to close their eyes and go into some state because they don't want to keep their eyes open to create a cognitive response to what's happening in their present moment. Eyes open. See the breath you just took? That's called the breath of resistance. That breath means that stuff is starting to come up and she doesn't want you to see it coming up. So she'd rather close her eyes, check out, and have you watch. But she's looking and her breath goes, when you hear someone do this, like that, that's because there's like intensity going on inside of their body. Continue, just look out. What are you feeling in your body right now? Tense, right? Okay. Say download water.
Download water.
What just happened when you did that?
It's like something just came from above and fell down to the floor between the head.
Say download more water.
Download more water.
Download more water.
Download more water.
This is the element that's missing in her system. Do you feel how the water is softening you?
I feel warmer, way warmer and softer. Yeah.
Download more water.
Download more water.
Download more water.
More water. That's good.
Now her thermogenic system is heating up. The balance of element is now returning into her system from the spirit world and entering into her body. This is now heating up her thermogenic system, releasing any toxins, poisons she's been holding on to in her system because she's been creating her body like a stone, like a rock, holding on to all this pain, emotions, everything inside. Download more water. See, as her eyes were starting to close, that is a sign that the part of her being is becoming more and more letting go of the internal fight that she has with herself. Most people think when they put up walls and barriers and try to put this strong persona on that they're actually protecting themselves. All they're doing is sending out energy into the universe saying, I'm scared to be open, so come towards me. So she's actually breaking down that wall right now. So her eyes are closing and fluttering, opening, closing, and fluttering. And her body, what's happening right now is her system is going through a complete resurgence of her entire being while surveillancing the room and then realizing that her being has been fighting her own progress. Because most human beings don't realize that when something gets in front of you, like you don't excel or success or any of these things, or you don't find love or whatever these things are, that's because you're the one. You're the one getting in your own way because you're fighting some aspect of yourself from being vulnerable enough for you to connect into this universal field of intelligence that actually makes those things happen for you. Download more water. Now let's see if I can talk to her body, if her body is now able to listen because her wall is coming down. Body, if you can hear me, blink her eyes very fast. Body, are you happy that she's releasing these walls so you can communicate back to nature and the universe? If so, blink her eyes faster. Body, if you require more water in your system to balance it, cough out of her mouth 5 times. If she's fighting you, oh, here we go. Body's talking. Body, if you would like for her to connect more into the water gateway of her being so she can have more power to move forward in life, cough out of her mouth 3 more times or yawn out of her system. What does it feel like inside your body? Do you notice how all that heaviness from your childhood and all that stuff is releasing and clearing up? Mm. Body, can you release more out of her system that she's been holding on to that's been getting in her way? Thank you, body. Is there more, body? How much is she holding on to, body? If there's more, cough out of her mouth 10 times uncontrollably. If there's some part of her right now that is trying to protect her, blink her eyes faster again. If she's going through a shift in her system, body, swallow her throat 3 times. That's 1. That's 2. That's 3. Looks like she's having a cathartic moment here. When you say it's super hot, can you explain to everyone what that feels like? Fascinating. Say, download more water. Eyes closing. I told you what that means. Welcome back. Where'd you go? Download more water. Balance my hormones. Bring joy through my body. What's happening now? So your own voice command is actually activating your ability to access these levels of consciousness. Mm-hmm. Say, shock my body with electricity. At 10,000. 20,000. 30,000. 40,000. Want to go deeper into the spirit world? 50,000. Say, expand my consciousness. Show me what's real. Show me what's fake. 60,000. 70,000. Bring my ancestors into the room. Connect me to all the elders on the planet. 80,000. Increase my psychic powers. 90,000. Show me my true self. How does that feel?
So good. Like I'm connected with everything.
That's right.
Thank you.
They connect me to the trees in the local area.
Connect me to the trees in the local area.
When I connect, shake my body. Download their wisdom into me. Can you see that technology? Connecting into a network that's been waiting for you to connect into it. Yes. Something that the world doesn't want us to do. They want us to stay sheep, slaves, hierarchy of nonsense, conveyor belt, one generation after the next, taking our children and our children's children and our children's children and making them slaves for their industries of power and control. They don't want us to be able to connect into this level of energy and power. No. Why would they? Then the system would have to change. You are very powerful. Everyone in this room is very powerful. Thank you.
All right, we're going to conclude this and take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Would you like to say any closing words, or I feel like you've done enough good today?
The only thing I would say is remember who you are. Don't buy into the nonsense of this world. Seek and search even more than what you see. Don't let the matrix take you in. Remember, you're so much more than that. And there's only one of you. There will never be another you ever again on this planet. So make the most of your life. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right, if you want to just talk amongst yourselves for 5 minutes, and I'm going to get the next speaker going. everyone. We are back. Thank you guys for staying and being here. I just want you to know how much I appreciate this. Really quick, with the first guest that we had, that is something that I've studied like my whole life. I'm obviously not a shaman myself, but I, as a child, thought I was connected to a lot of these things, and a lot of people thought I had a mental illness, which was fun. But now, obviously, it's very under control, and I just think that everyone can access these gifts, so why not learn more about it and not feel like you're weird if you have a gift or like you need to take medication. Nothing against that if someone needs it, but yeah, I just feel like it's very important to connect with your true self, especially in the entertainment industry and in Los Angeles, and to know your values and listen to your inner voice, and yeah, just to know how powerful you are, because sometimes we all can forget that and go through really dark things. But I think it's okay to go through dark things too, because that's how you, I feel like, figure out who your true self is. You don't figure it out by being happy every day. So I feel like those dark times in our life are kind of a blessing, in my opinion, because that's the only time I've made any changes. So the next awesome guest we have is Dr. Benjamin Gross. This is science. This is the science topic. He received his PhD in physics from USC and studied bacteria that generated electricity as part of their metabolism. He currently teaches gifted students mathematics, and he is an avid fan of science fiction and aspires to inspire the next generation of innovators. And this is awesome for any writers or filmmakers in particular, because I think a lot of the stuff he'll talk about today you can apply to your next screenplays. So without further ado, Dr. Benjamin Gross.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. So I really appreciate the warm welcome, and I figured I would start by just talking about me for a brief minute. And while we get the PowerPoint slide set up. So my name is Ben. Unless you're one of my students, then my name is Dr. G. But for the rest of you, just Ben. Oh, sorry, I'll pace otherwise. And I've had sort of two careers. The first one was as a biophysics researcher. I was an experimentalist, and I'll talk a little bit more about the bacteria that she alluded to a little later in my talk. But basically, I was at USC, and I lived in a windowless room staring down a microscope for a long time, trying to figure out the mysteries of life through the lens of science and mathematics. And then when I finished my degree, I went into teaching, and now I teach profoundly gifted students. So I work with like little sixth graders that can do calculus and make us all feel dumb. It's a lot of fun. And this talk is going to be mostly about the biophysics part, but I know that I'm talking to writers, and you guys may want to write characters that are geniuses. I think there's more geniuses in Hollywood than in real life. And if you want to reach out at some point and ask me, hey, how would you write this particular genius character, I can give you some insights into what real geniuses are like. The first thing that I want to say is I'm not a filmmaker. I'm not an author. And as authors, and especially science fiction, you guys are free to break any rule of anything as long as it tells me an interesting story. That's all I want out of you guys. I was trying to think when I was asked by Dana to do this, what you guys would want from a scientist. And I could just go through a whole bunch of technical gobbledygook up here and bore you to death with data and more data and more data. And I'm going to do a little bit of that, but it's got a lot of pretty pictures. So don't worry, it's not too many graphs. There's one though. But mostly I was just thinking about food for thought. Well, what kinds of information could you guys draw on in order to be creative? And so my talk is structured looking at the past, the present, and the future of scientific revolutions. One of those things is pretty easy to talk about, the past. The present, it's pretty fun. It's what I do. And then the future, of course, well, we'll deal with that when we get there, as always, I suppose. Okay, so without further ado, I want to ask a quick question. So about 400 years ago, a bunch of brilliant people, some of whose names we know, Sir Isaac Newton, Galileo, Kepler, these guys were studying the mysteries of the world. And one of the first mysteries that we really unlocked from a scientific perspective is how planets move. So planets, we used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe and everything went around the Earth, or that there were these rigid shells and everything was glued to these shells and they moved around. And it took About 400 years ago, we figured out that the sun was at the center of the solar system and that the planets moved. And not only did they move, they didn't even move in circles. They moved in ellipses, which is a really kind of, it's like a flattened circle. And that's a huge insight. And we figured it out with mathematics. But of all the scientific phenomenon in the world to study, static electricity, frogs, water, all sorts of things, why was it that the planets, of all things, they're distant from us? We don't really interact with them on a day-to-day basis. Clean water seems more prescient, right, to the needs of people 400 years ago. Why is it that the planets were the first thing that we figured out? And if anybody, I can't actually see anything because there's all these lights in my face, but if anybody wants to like maybe wave a hand around, and you can see motion in the dark, I'm told, if they have a guess. If not, it's fine. I'll just answer my own rhetorical question. Up to you guys. Go ahead. Yeah, one of the first things that we really started to understand from a scientific perspective during the Renaissance 400 years ago. Well, there's a lot of things in the sky. There's yeah, I see a hand, I think. Do I see a hand? Or is that just a person standing there with an arm against a shirt? Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to see. So I would say, so I had a teacher at Caltech, and he posed this idea to us, and his answer was, we had new instruments. So when you have a new instrument, you're able to see the world differently. We used to never be able to see the rings of Saturn, for example, or the moons of Jupiter. You need a telescope in order to see these things. And so with the, with all the Europe finally going and trying to invade the Middle East, as is their way, and bringing back lenses and sextants and eventually compasses and all these things, we were starting to be able to study the sky, which is something people had done as a hobby for a long time, but we were starting to get accurate data, to put measurements down on paper. So I'm going to do the first slide there. So I'm going to show you what I consider a sort of cartoon virtuous cycle that leads to scientific revolutions. And it starts, well, as any cycle starts, it starts wherever you want to start in the cycle, but I'm going to start with the new instruments. So you have a telescope, you have a sextant, and you can start taking data. So there's a guy named Tycho Brahe, who is an astronomer, and he took meticulous data about the positions of the planets for over 20 years. And another famous person would inherit that data from him named Johannes Kepler. And Kepler came up with Kepler's laws of planetary motion from studying that data. So when we have new instruments, we are able to get new data. That's an actual notebook from Kepler's notes about the orbits of the planets. And when we have the new data, the next thing that we get is some insights. So Kepler had some key insights. He had what we call Kepler's laws. There are a few observations about how all the things move no matter what through the planets. I won't go through all of Kepler's laws. We're not here for an astronomy lesson. But these laws were like mind-boggling insights that all the planets were doing these things. And when you look at the planets in the sky, it's not obvious that they're going around the sun. They actually kind of do this, right? They sort of loop around when you watch them in the sky. It's a very bizarre pattern that they follow. The Aztecs used to call the moon the drunken man in the sky. You couldn't figure out what the heck it was doing, right? And so figuring out that these things actually had a really elegant path was a huge breakthrough. But that breakthrough is just the beginning. The key insight is just the beginning, because what happens next is we get a coherent theory. This is where Sir Isaac Newton comes on the scene. Sir Isaac Newton was an interesting guy. If he'd had a Twitter account, he would have reminded us of Elon Musk, to be perfectly fair. If you look into his personal life, he got in spats and fights with all sorts of academics. Supposedly he burned the only remaining photo of Robert Hooke, and various other things. He was a prickly, belligerent person with very few friends, but he figured out physics. He actually invented calculus so that he could figure out the very first laws of physics that we call Newtonian physics. And he figured these things out, and then he just sat on them for 20 years because he hated everybody and he didn't want to share his insights. So one day his friend comes to him, and his friend says, "Hey, what orbit do the planets make?" And he goes, "It's an ellipse." And he goes, "How do you know?" And he just busts out the calculus, and he goes, and he proves it to the guy, leaving this guy's jaw on the floor, right? And he's like, "How long have you known this?" And he's like, 20 years, something like that. He'd been busy doing alchemy in the meantime, trying to turn his urine into gold. And not everybody, no one's perfect. And so this idea leads to this guy convincing Newton to publish one of the most important books ever published, called the Mathematica Principia. And in the Principia, in the first 3 pages, are Newton's laws of physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Force equals mass times acceleration. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Objects in motion tend to stay at motion. And also how to use the mathematics of these in order to predict the motion of physical objects. So when you drop something, you know it's going to fall. If you're a scientist, you know exactly how long it's going to take to fall. If you heat things, you know how much they're going to expand. If you if you push an object and it bashes into an object, you know how that object's going to go. Anybody who plays pool knows those rules intuitively. We can now have a mathematical language to describe these things. And with this mathematical language, not only can we explain things around us, but we can begin to make predictions. That's the real power of physics, is the ability to predict what something will do next under a set of circumstances. And when you have the ability to do predictions, you can start to build things. And when you build things based on these predictions, and the predictions are right, you get new technology. So you get the Industrial Revolution. And the new technology allows you to create economic incentives. I mean, it's not only physics that opened up the Industrial Revolution, but without physics, it doesn't happen. With new technology, all of a sudden there's an interest in figuring out how to make engines more efficient, which leads to thermodynamics. There's an interest in new materials, which leads to purifying coppers and silvers, leads to battery technology, as chemistry was happening alongside this. And with those technologies, you eventually get to electricity, you get to magnetism, you start looking at these two different things. When I hook up this electrical circuit, there's a spark, what's causing it, why does the magnet, why does the needle on the compass move? When I run current through a wire, what's going on there? And you get James Clerk Maxwell, who comes up with his theory about it explains light and electricity and magnetism. And then 50 years later, we have to merge that with some observations from Newton, and we get Einstein and relativity. And from there, we get quantum mechanics. And from quantum mechanics, we get computer technology. And the computer technology allows us to collect huge amounts of data, and that data allows us to, we start miniaturizing things and looking at small-scale things, and that brings us to the present. So this cycle it's not a perfect cycle. This is more, I wrote this mostly for writers, because when you're writing a script, you obviously have to trim a lot of the nonsense and the ugliness and the mess that goes into real life. But this is a great way to think about, why would a new technology appear in my world? Why would this have happened? How would this have come about? And so, for instance, an example of this, I'll get to that in just a sec, sorry. That's okay, that slide's fine. But an example of this is the speed of light. We now know that the speed of light is 3 with 8 zeros after it, meters per second. Or it takes about 8 minutes for light to go from the sun to the earth, or about half a second for light to go from the sun to the moon. It takes a nanosecond for light to go about this far, and light can go around the world about 7 times in a second, if I'm remembering those numbers right. And so light's very quick. And a guy named Galileo tried to figure out the speed of light, and he stood on a mountain, and he had his helper monkey stand on the other mountain, and they had lanterns with shutters, and they would time things with their pulse, and they'd have the lanterns with the shutters, and they tried to measure, okay, I'll open the lantern, then you open it as soon as you see it, then I'll open it, then you open it, then I'll open it, and we'll take time, and we'll figure out what's going on. And he wasn't able to measure anything, and all he could say was that if light isn't instantaneous, it's very, very fast, which is the right observation when your instruments are no good, right? You try to measure something, and you don't have the resolution on your instrument. That's the correct thing to come up with. But we now know that the light has a very particular speed. And so that's just to point out that you can't make a scientific discovery like the speed of light without a groundswell underneath you of technological breakthroughs, science, instruments, and data that comes before you. You have to have those things, or you can't see what you're trying to study. Okay, so that brings us to, where are we today? I think that the the computer revolution led us to things like the electron microscope and computer technology that allows us to collect data and do a ton of mathematics on that data, which I consider us to be somewhere in the new instrument to new data range. So what's happened about 20 years ago, this guy, 20 internet points to anybody who knows who this guy is. I wouldn't have recognized him until I Googled it. This is J. Craig Venter. 20 points to anybody who now knows who he is. J. Craig Venter is a zillionaire in San Diego who runs an institute called the JCVI, the J. Craig Venter Institute. Go figure, right? Do these guys ever name things not after themselves? Anyway, so J. Craig Venter is fascinated with biotechnology, and he threw a bunch of money at being the first human being ever to have his DNA completely sequenced. So that's what this is, a cool animation of DNA, which is the A's, T's, G's, and C's that write the instruction manual for making our cells. And anybody want to venture a guess as to how much this cost? 20 million. I got 20 million, 20 million, 20 million. Do I 30 million, 30 million? Anybody want to give me 30 million, 30 million, 30 million? 100 million, 100 million. Next slide. Next slide. Sold for $1 billion. It cost $1 billion, give or take, to sequence this man's DNA. But, next slide, 20 years of research, advancements, developing the technology, learning how it works, and now you can get it for the low, low price, ladies and gentlemen, of $1,500. This is for your entire genome. Now, when you do 23andMe, they don't actually sequence your entire genome. They have a series of basically chemical proteins that look for specific markers in your DNA. So they're taking a low-res, ultra JPEG version of your DNA and just looking for certain features. Are you going to be blind? Are you going to be tall? Whatever. Like, are you going to be a sun sneezer? That's one that they have on there. And my son is, by the way. He looks at the sun and he just starts sneezing repeatedly. It's adorable for now. But yeah, so that's 20 years of research. Now, the reason I point this out is that 20 years ago, we didn't even have the iPhone 1. The iPhone 1 came out 2 months after Barack Obama announced he was running for president the first time. That's how long cell phones have been with us. Not that long. For anybody who's in their mid-20s or older around here, which I think is one or two of you, that is in our adult lifetime. I remember the first time I saw somebody with an iPhone, and the fact that you could rewind your voicemails, that you didn't have to listen to the whole preamble, it was mind-blowing, right? Before that had happened, this guy had his DNA sequenced. So while we were watching cell phones get smarter and faster and have more memory and more pixels, and the camera got more and more of those little dots on the front of it, all that stuff was happening. We were looking at a computer revolution. RAM was getting faster. Processors were getting faster. Monitors were 4K, 8K, billion K. Starting to look at Oculus. So if you asked what was the technological revolution in the last 20 years, everybody would say it was a computer revolution. And they're right, but there was another revolution happening in the shadows, and it was the biotechnology revolution. The biotechnology revolution is not as famous because we don't produce any consumer products. There isn't the biotech store. You can't walk into a store and be like, oh, we'll talk about that in a minute, but you can't walk in and buy products from these people. They are medical technologies. You only get them if you're in trouble at the hospital. They cost way too much money, and you don't really see much about them. But this is where we're at right now, and I got to be honest, I kind of wish I had the computer in front of me because I don't remember what the next slide is, but let's go ahead and do this. So yeah, so now with the ability to look at genomes, we're able to actually start affecting the genome, and we've started to be able to actually cut and splice DNA and protein, DNA, which are instructions to write proteins, from one creature to another, which has allowed us to address the age-old philosophical question that I know has burned in all of our hearts, which is, what would happen if you crossed a squid with a mouse? Anybody ever wondered this? Keeps me up at night. What would happen? Anybody? You get glow-in-the-dark mice. These are transgenic mice. They're part squid. These are glow-in-the-dark mice. You can shine a black light on them, and they glow, the poor things. I don't think it's going to really help them escape snakes and whatnot, but it's neat to look at. And these things are part squid. They can also do it with different colors, which make them, I believe, part coral reef. So you can make a mouse that's part coral reef. Very, very small part coral reef, but it is part coral reef. Now, this technology is at least 10 years old, which means this is an iPhone 3 of biotechnology. This is old stuff. We've been able to do this for forever. So let's see, what's the next slide? Oh, go back one. Okay, so this is another relative of that mouse. This brings me to my story. So as we're moving through time, this brings us to right around 2014, 2015. This is a bacteria. It's called Shewanella onidensis MR1. It's a mouthful. And it's a bacteria that makes electricity as part of how it breathes. And this is where I enter the story. And we were studying these. Now, these particular strain here actually has the same protein in it, the same glow-in-the-dark protein that the mice had, so that we can see the bacteria. Now, something I want to point out for all you science fiction writers when you have your special effects team, when it comes to microscopes, actual microscopes, seeing things with the naked eye, this is physically as good as it can ever get. The resolution, the pixel size that you can get in nature is proportional to what color light you have. So red light cycles has a cycle which is one cycle every 500 nanometers, which is not very much. That's 501 billionths of a meter is the light cycles. And so it can only detect things that are about twice that. So it can only give you images that are about a micron, which is about what these bacteria are. This is an incredibly good microscope. This is probably a $150,000 microscope that we're looking down here. And this is as good as a picture of bacteria gets. We can see more, but you have to bear in mind that in order to see these things, we need roundabout ways of imaging things that are very clever. So if you ever have a scene where a guy's just like zooming in and zooming in and zooming in, and he gets the bacteria, and we zoom in, and the bacteria winks and gives us a thumbs up, and we zoom in further and look at it. No, that's not possible, not with light anyway, so you kind of need to keep that in the back of your mind. There are limitations to what you can see based on physics. I don't actually care if you put that in your show, but as like a nerd, it's sort of a pet peeve of mine when they like zoom in super hard. But this is Shewanella, and it makes electricity as part of how it breathes. So I'm going to briefly explain how this works. So next slide. That's okay. So this is a diagram that was in my PhD thesis, and A is a cartoon of these proteins, and on the bottom is inside the cell, and where the blue things are on the top is outside the cell. And when we breathe, or when we eat food, here's a fun question for you. If a person loses 300 pounds, where'd it go? Where'd the weight go? So a 450-pound person drops down to 150 pounds. You know, feel-good story on Instagram this week, right? Where did the weight physically go? But they're made of stuff, right? Like the weight was made of stuff, like carbon and things like that, right? Where did it go? Yeah, but where did it go? You breathe it out. Yeah, somebody got it. You exhale it. See, you're made of these complicated Legos of carbon, and burning them is literally taking oxygen and breaking the carbon apart and sticking oxygen and carbon together to make carbon dioxide. And so you're actually getting rid of the fat in your body through breathing. So next time you're at the gym and you're huffing and puffing, just realize that's actual fat leaving your body while you're exhaling. Every exhale is actual fat leaving your body. And I need to tell myself that more. But part of that process involves the bonds in the food have these electrons that are in a high state of energy. When we snap those bonds, that electron comes flying out of there, and it goes through a Plinko machine that we call the ATP synthase complex. It goes blink, 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 blink through all these proteins, and as a process, it generates this molecule that we call ATP. And if you remember your high school biology, ATP is the energy currency of the cell. But when we're done, we have this low energy electron. We got to get rid of this guy. And so what you and I do is we use that electron as part of the gluing mechanism to stick the oxygen to the carbon. And also we make water, and then we exhale it. And that's how we get rid of the electron. The way this bacteria did it, though, is it had these proteins, and the little red dots are little bits of iron called heme groups, just like hemoglobin. Heme is a fancy word for iron, so little dots of iron. And when these things get close to a piece of metal, they touch the metal, and the electrons can play hopscotch and go from one red dot to the other, dot, 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 until they get to the metal, and hence their name metal reducing. Reducing is another way of saying for zapping things with electricity. And so these are metal reducing bacteria. In part B, we see a zoom in of one of those cartoon proteins, and you can see all these weird blobby shapes. And I just said a little while ago that we can't actually see these with light, so how do we do it? As a condition of my parole from graduate school, I was forced to actually study this relatively deeply. That's a little inside baseball joke. They make you study a topic that's not your topic just to prove that you can do it so that you can leave. It is a pain in the neck. But I'll talk a little bit more about this, this process in a minute. So next slide. This was the actual doodad that I made in order to study these things. I made a tiny microchip. I actually manufactured this thing myself in a nanofabrication laboratory. And on the microchips there, where you can see in part A, there's a little cutout. There's a tiny electrode. And I would use a laser beam, and I would grab a hold of single bacterial cells and with a laser beam, and I would land them on the electrode. And there's a little diagram of what that would look like. It's kind of hard to see the little red the cone-shaped thing with a little. It's okay. Can I stand here for a minute? So, like, right up there's a bacteria that's trapped in a beam of light, and it would land on the electrode. And this is what the apparatus looked like. I just grabbed that stuff from my work. And you touch it down, and you try very hard to measure how much electricity each individual cell made. Next slide. And this is my entire life up to age 32 on one slide. So there's a bacteria, landed on an electrode, and there's a little spike in electricity when they landed. Yay! And so you ask, well, Ben, how much electricity did they make? And I answer, not enough, because I went into teaching. But A is the bacteria that have a protein that allows them to make electricity, and B is a mutant that we made that we removed one of its proteins that was part of the cycle to prove that that protein was necessary for making the electricity. And so we would measure the A, and then we'd measure the B, and we'd say, see, look, some of them can make electricity, and their mutant cousins cannot, so that protein that we removed must have been important. And that's a part of how we start to stitch together where things are and how they work. It's a bunch of detective work, essentially, piecing together the murder mystery of what's really going on in the picture. Next slide. Okay. Anybody know what this is? Everybody thinks it's the coronavirus. I'm 50-50. That's not what I Googled when I looked for this image. This is actually the Pfizer vaccine. This is man-made. Now, it looks like a living system, but this is man-made. This is the state-of-the-art as of right now. Whether you think this is a good technology or bad technology, we'll leave that for another thing. It's an advanced technology, that is for sure. This is all made of living stuff. The blue is the same material that we make, that our cells are made out of. The red proteins, those are actual proteins and other sugars. This is the secret sauce. The difference between Moderna and Pfizer is basically those red things on the outside, how they do it. And when they bump into your cells, the yellow on the inside is the mRNA, and that gets shot into your cell, and your cell mistakenly copy-pastes, like reads those instructions and follows them to generate the protein that is the protein that your body will recognize, hopefully, as COVID. And this is made in the lab. This is man-made stuff. So the next part of this talk, I'm just going to go through and point out a few of the current technologies for those of you that are interested in where we are right now and what it all means. Some of it I'm an expert on, like the previous stuff, and some of it I'm just bringing my education to bear on commonly available information out there. So yeah, and by the way, this is obviously a computer-generated image. I hope we can all tell that at this point, but that's because, like I said, you can't actually look at this thing with regular light. Next slide. You're going to start to see a lot more of these headlines. We're getting to the point now where the last 20 years are starting to pay dividends in the forms of new technologies. We're starting to be able to actually heal people with genetic modifications. So they're starting to be able to heal spinal cord injuries, starting to be able to cure cancers. I saw a headline this morning where they used a gene treatment on a bunch of people with cancer, and literally all of them went into remission to the point where the cancer was undetectable. Next slide. This is those proteins. One of the things I want to emphasize about biotechnology and where we are right now is that biological systems are astoundingly complex. The most complex things we've ever begun to wrap our head around. The bacteria I studied had 6 million proteins on its outside membrane, and we knew about how 10 of them worked. If you extend it to other systems that we know, I could up that as far as 100. Maybe 100 proteins, we know how they work, out of 6 million. So these proteins are amazingly complicated molecules. And the way we study them, I'm going to talk about it here and then I think in the next slide, but don't do that yet, is we basically have to make a whole bunch of the protein, then we have to freeze them, and then we have to bombard them with neutrons, and we have to look at how the neutrons bounce off of them and bounce off of each other, and then we have to collect them in these huge detectors and run a giant math program against them in order to try to piece together this image of how this protein works. And that's really just the protein when it's frozen. This headline caught my attention because they actually are figuring out how the protein moves. So these things are way more complicated than a car, and we're just now starting to see how they move a little bit. So we are really still just scratching the surface of this revolution. This is a merger of the two technological revolutions. This is called AlphaFold, and what it is it's basically Siri autocomplete, but for proteins. You feed it a DNA sequence, and it tries to predict what the protein will come out as. This is mathematically considered an almost impossible problem. But what we do is just the same thing they do with facial recognition. We just fed it DNA sequence, picture a protein, DNA sequence, picture a protein. We just did that 1 billion times and tweaked the software a whole bunch of hopefully well-paid nerds in an office somewhere doing this. And now we can feed it an unknown piece of DNA, and it can predict with a high level of accuracy what that protein will look like. And then we check and see if it was right, and it was. And so this is a huge deal because this is giving us the keys to the kingdom. This means that we can sit at a computer and write a string of DNA and then say, hey, AlphaFold, what if I did this? What would it do? And it go, and it make a blob for us. And we go, what if I change it and make a different blob for us? And as we start to do what the previous people are doing is figuring out how those blobs move and what their purpose is, we can start to actually engineer our own proteins, and that from our own DNA. And this is, in my opinion, the beginning of some very big things that are going to happen in our lifetime. I think I have a couple more. This is one where we're also starting to extend this imaging technology and all this AI stuff. This isn't quite about cells, but it is about the brain. This was a study that they did recently at MIT where they were able to tell an abnormality in the brains of psychopaths. So this, for you writers out there, this could be an interesting question, a sort of Black Mirror thing. Like, what if you had a kid and you scanned his brain and you realized he had a high probability of being a psychopath? What if there was a treatment for it? What if psychopaths didn't want the treatment? But we could give it to them and we could prevent all sorts of, what are the ethical implications of that? What's the right thing to do? I don't have an answer, but it could be a really fun episode where do we take people that we know have a high probability of being dangerous and force a medical treatment on them because it's safer for society? Or do we honor free choice and we allow them to evolve as they're going to? How certain do we have to be that what they have is going to cause death and mayhem? Maybe they're just a jerk, or maybe they're just a isolated, lonely librarian who just doesn't like people, but they're good at their job. You know, like, when do we step in? What are the ethical implications of tweaking someone's brain and changing their personality? How does that work? These are things that not only are going to be science fiction, but I predict are going to be science fact and science realities that we're going to have to deal with. These are the ethical questions that right now we're dealing with. Do we let teenage girls on social media? This is going to be that generation's version of those kinds of ethical problems. Next slide. Okay. So this brings us, although these are interesting technologies, a lot of what I've shown you here is really what I consider new data. Yes, there are some applications, the coronavirus vaccine being a really big one, but a lot of what we're doing is still trying to figure out what's going on. So what I want to posit next is, as we step into the future, I think the next phase, if this cycle is to hold true, is that we need a coherent theory of life. We don't really have one. We have boundaries on what this theory is. We know certain things it has to do, certain rules it has to follow, but exactly what everything is doing, what are the underlying mechanisms of living systems, we're still nipping around the edges of how this works. We know, for instance, that DNA encodes proteins, but do we know why certain proteins work and why others don't? Why certain things harmonize together and others don't? Why does coevolution keep finding the same solution to things over and over again? Why does evolution choose to do some very stupid things sometimes and some very clever things other times? There's a lot going on at the cellular level, and it's entirely possible that it's always going to be hodgepodge. Now, this I should actually give a disclaimer. As Niels Bohr, the famous physicist, once said, prediction is hard, especially about the future. So I am now going to try to predict the future, and I am going to be as wrong as anybody when they try to predict the future. If I could do it, I'd be a billionaire, right? Like just out there predicting stocks and picking winners in the biotech space. But I'm not doing that. I'm teaching little geniuses and stuff like that. So all this stuff is just, this is the fun part of the talk where I just get to spitball and make things up. So I think that if we were to have a coherent theory, some of the things that we might be able to do would be to start creating our own new life forms. Start actually inventing life forms ourselves. So, next slide. Yeah, this is the new technologies. So what if instead of just ordering a hypoallergenic cat, what if you could order any creature that you wanted? What would you order? I know what I'd order first. Next slide. Oh, I will. Yeah, this is me. Oh, no. Oh, I'm missing a slide. No. Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's fine. It's fine. I realize it's out of order. It's okay. So when people think about new biotechnology, sorry, I'm going to veer a little bit. Sorry about that. Next slide. That's fine. I'll do this. When people think about biotechnology, this is what I grew up thinking about. This is Jean-Luc Picard, and he has been assimilated by the Borg. And what I like to point out about this is that it's clunky metal, almost like steampunk, like awkwardly and uncomfortably welded onto his face, right? This is what we think of as biotechnology. It's the pacemaker on scary steroids, right? And maybe giving us enhanced vision or all this stuff. We think of physical silicon metal-based stuff wedged into our flesh, right? I think that's a common image that people will pull up when they think of using technology to enhance life. And another image, if you say, well, what if we were to create life? Next slide. I think you might picture something like this guy, right? An artificial intelligence, right? A fully synthetic, plastic-like creature, stiff, awkward, stilted, like us, but in an uncanny valley kind of way. Hopefully benevolent and kind and a little quirky and fun, but maybe not, right? If you watch Terminator. And I think that these are sort of old-fashioned images because they both rely on sort of stiff, metal, clunky technology taking the place of like organic living things. So this is what I would build. Anybody know that guy? Anybody? What's that? It's Momo, the flying lemur monkey from Avatar: The Last Airbender. No Avatar fans in here? I'm the only one? All right. Wow. No, the movie. No, come on. You have to watch the cartoon. Okay. So anyway, this is actually something I think we could build. I actually think we could build this in the next 50 years or so. Because it's based on a lemur's body. You just have to like tweak the DNA for the wings under the arms, give it slightly bigger ears. I think the eyes would be hard to do, right? Like making those big old eyes. I don't know why we do it. But I could totally see taking a lemur's DNA, taking its an ovum, a fertilized ovum from a lemur, and just going in with a computer and using all of those biotech tools and tweaking the DNA of the lemur and literally being able to order a flying lemur monkey and naming him Momo if you'd like. I think this is not too far-fetched. It's going to be longer than we would like, but this is something that you might be able to get. And the question then becomes, okay, so if we can start inventing our own life forms, what's in bounds and what's out of bounds? Here's another slightly scarier option. I don't know, maybe Raytheon's already working on this in a basement somewhere, right? Dragons, I don't know how useful they'd be, but I'm sure some creatures would be considered military hardware. They'd be banned. We'd have to talk about, do we have a dragon ban in this country? Does the Second Amendment protect our right to bear dragons? How far is too far? I mean, what about my freedom to have a dragon that eats my neighbors? Is that okay? I don't know, and we're going to have to figure these things out because I actually think that maybe this thing's a little too big, but there were creatures this big, right? They're dinosaurs. So you might just be able to go in and just figure out, okay, how do I make it bigger? How do I make it have more teeth? Like you just take an iguana and just like supersize the thing. I don't know how we do the fire breath, but I'll leave that for future generations of scientists and madmen alike. So this is sort of my prediction of the near future. I think human enhancement, yes, cognitive abilities, all those kinds of questions about is it ethical to make your baby smarter and taller and all those kinds of things. Get rid of diseases, yes. Get rid of deformities, yes. What about the deaf community might have something to say about this. They aren't always a fan of trying to fix them. They have a thriving community, and they don't always like that kind of thing. But I think that the one that we're not really thinking about is the fact that fantasy creatures could actually be a scientific reality where we actually build our own creatures and order them. And it doesn't have to be mammals or lizards or four-legged creatures. They could be weird funguses that do things. Maybe we could put Apple's adapter issue out of business by making a fungus that can conduct electricity and data, and you just stick the fungus to the wall and stick the other end of your adapter, and it figures it out for you. And so one charger to rule them all. That'd be kind of cool. I would order that. But yeah, these are some ideas for you aspiring writers out there to throw into your work. So this is what I would call the near future. The next thing I want to talk about is the far future. And before I do, I want to do, well, in order to do this, I want to do a little bit of an analogy. And this is where prediction is easy because I'll be dead before I'm proven wrong. So I can just say whatever I want. But when I think about humanity and the destiny of the human race, I think a lot about, no, not yet. Okay. All right, that's fine. That's okay. I have to ramble for a minute. I think about a chicken inside of an egg. And when a chicken's just a few cells, it's surrounded by a nourishing environment, and it's safe, and it can just grow as much as it wants. And it consumes it, the yolk. It begins consuming the yolk and growing and consuming the yolk and growing. And as it does, it begins to fill the egg with its own filth, right? Because that's what organisms do. And as I can't imagine what the experience would be like for a chicken when it starts to run out of yolk. It must panic. I'm going to die. I'm out of food, right? What does it do? It hatches. When it hatches into an entirely new world, a complete paradigm shift for that chicken that has only ever known being inside of an egg. When I look at the climate change problems, the wars, all the things that are happening on planet Earth, the Earth kind of reminds me of that yolk, and humans of that little ball of cells. And we've been growing and expanding and consuming the resources of the Earth that has everything that we need. But maybe it's just an egg, and maybe the next phase for us is to begin to hatch. It's a scarier world. It's less nourishing. It's less comfortable, but it's bigger, just like the world for the chicken is bigger when it hatches. And so, next slide. I think this is what's next. That's okay. So this, and when it does this, I tend to think that natural patterns will repeat themselves, like a fractal. So when we have like a fungus, this sort of fungus in Figure A is actually it grows and creates networks, and they actually can use the networks of these fungus to solve certain math problems. There's a famous one called the traveling salesman problem. They can't solve it perfectly, but they can get very close by by literally setting up the problem on a petri dish and letting the fungus grow, and the fungus figures out the best way to connect everything together. And so we start to see these network effects. You'll see these network effects in living systems. You'll see them in internet connectivity issues. You'll see them all over the place. And the one on the far picture, I think, is the type of networks that we might begin to see as humans spread out among the star systems. So we leave Earth, our happy little egg, and we begin to bifurcate and spread. And when creatures do this, this is what drives evolution. Some species go into one niche, other species go into another niche, and they have different needs. And as a result, natural selection and possibly biotechnological selection, cultural selection, some people might say that it's unethical to do this, and these people might be all for it. And you can start to actually see how different species may not already be out there. Maybe there aren't gray aliens that resemble humans with big gray eyes out there yet. But maybe in a million years, that's where we're headed. Maybe we're the progenitor species. We're the first bacteria, the first fish on land. And everything that's going to fill the solar system and the galaxy with life is going to be our descendants. So there's actually been, I'm not the first person to think of this, there's other research groups that have done this. This is a picture of a galaxy where each pink line is the trajectory of species. This would take millions of years. This does not presuppose the ability to travel faster than light. So as of right now, we don't have any concept of how we would actually do that. So maybe we're stuck traveling at very slow speeds, but even still, life, what's the famous line? Life finds a way, right? So maybe we start to spread throughout the galaxy, sort of like almost like an invasive species, but maybe slightly more optimistic than that. I don't know. It depends on your predisposition towards the human condition. Yeah, and so we start to spread out, and then maybe these different species run into each other. And next slide. Maybe we, Maybe this is your great 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 etc. grandkid, right? Maybe that's isn't he a looker? Yeah, another Star Trek reference. And if you want something slightly more inspiring, maybe it's this guy instead, with his neon cool glow in the dark stuff. I don't know what video game this guy's from, but I like his suit. I would wear it for Halloween. That's the end of my talk. I hope you found it entertaining, maybe a little bit of food for thought. Nothing that I say here needs to be held to by creative people. Part of the job of you guys is to show me worlds that maybe are impossible. I mean, the Jedi, right? Like, wonderfully fun franchise that has absolutely nothing to do with reality. But maybe you can be inspired by some of this. One of the things that I would leave you with is that Richard Feynman once said that genius is creativity in a straitjacket. What he meant by that is that you can be creative, you can write anything down that you want, but when you are constrained, your creativity is forced to find clever, optimal solutions out of a situation. It's the magician who puts himself in an impossible situation and has to come up with a way to solve that situation that none of us can see or predict or understand how it's going to happen. How does he know what card I'm thinking of? How does he break out of the handcuffs? How does he do that? How did he make that thing fly? That's creativity in a straitjacket. The straitjacket being our expectations, and the creativity being the solution where he violates everything that we expect that we can see. I think that the best writing comes when we stick to that principle, when we constrain ourselves and then find a way to wriggle out of those constraints in a creative way. That's all that's my talk. I hope you guys had fun.
I was taking notes. Does anyone, I know there was a lot and it's been 2 hours, but does anyone want to ask a quick question before we, yes, Sean.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the glow-in-the-dark mice. That's 10-year-old technology. I mean, we're at the baby steps of this, but yeah. Glow-in-the-dark mice are a real thing. You used to be able to buy them. I've actually been looking for them online. I know you can buy glow-in-the-dark fish still. They might have taken the mice. That company might have folded, but you can find YouTube videos where guys have them in tanks and they shine the UV lights on them and they glow and they talk about getting blue ones and red ones and stuff. Yeah, we're already beginning to. So, two answers to that. The first one is, do I know what anybody on Earth is doing right now? Do I know what labs in other countries are doing? No, I don't. Do I? However, on the up and up labs, the things that we would consider like in the light of day, are not yet doing that, although they are capable of it. There's just so much. If you want to go through official channels and be an FDA, approved technology, these things take forever. They are, however, doing this for cancer patients. So going in and tweaking a single cell before it becomes a human is a huge ethical problem, as you can probably imagine. Like, what if you messed that? Like, what if your parents made you glow in the dark? You'd suck at manhunt. Would you be mad at them? I would be, probably, right? My parents gave me a funny name, and I'm annoyed at them. Like, I can't imagine if they made me glow in the dark. I mean, if it was cool, like, all right, maybe. But, like, what if it wasn't, So in terms of ethical, outstanding, like, above-board research, we're not yet doing that to humans. Except in the cases where they have cancers that are going to kill them anyway. We're doing some level of preliminary experimentation on that. In terms of like shady stuff that people are doing or other countries are doing that don't have our same ethics, I can't speak to that. I don't know of it for a fact. But it is not outside the realm of possibility that that's happening. That was the goal. Yeah, just fill your plate with thoughts. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine it has to do with stem cells as well as just tweaking the DNA and trying to get the nerves to talk to each other again. Those things are very complicated, so each one of those technologies requires several lifetimes of different researchers collaborating and working together to understand the ins and outs of those specific things. I worked with bacteria, I didn't work on human systems, so I can't tell you exactly what mechanism, but stem cells, CRISPR, that kind of thing is all in the ballpark of the tools that they would be trying to use to fix that. That's right. Yeah, regenerating the nerves, growing them back, teaching them to talk to each other again, using any and every tool at their disposal. Yeah, that's a fair guess that it's stem cells. I don't know for a fact. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't I consider the spiritual world not my jurisdiction, if that makes sense. So what I think of is, if you rewind the clock 4.5 billion years, according to the theory of evolution on Earth, the Earth was a barren, lifeless rock, a volcanic, acidic atmosphere, no oxygen. It was all CO2 and methane. And then at some point, somewhere on Earth, and we're not entirely sure the details, though I think we're getting close, something happened, and something started to divide and grow. And that thing eventually would spread out and cover basically every inch of the Earth in its descendants. Every shark, every moss, every tree, every human, all of those things are descended from that one thing. When I look at the galaxy, let's assume for the sake of argument that there's no other alien life at the moment, right? That it's just us. And it's a kind of a bleak assumption, and everybody likes to think, oh, there's got to be aliens. The Pentagon released those videos. There must be aliens. What if there's not? Just hypothetically, just bear with me, right? If there's not, then that means that an entire sea of lifeless rocks and burning stars, we're the only thing. We're like that first bacteria. And so I can't say that we're going to go in one direction. I think it's possible that we're going to go in every direction. The same way that bacteria's descendants, some of them became fish, some of them became trees, some of them became moss. Who knows what we'll become? Maybe we'll become, more advanced humans with psychic connections to each other, or maybe we'll become more like plants, or maybe we'll become space fish, and maybe we'll become all those things and many more, things that we can't even imagine yet, as we spread out into different corners and capture new resources and learn to live in environments that you and I would consider, complete death at the moment. Maybe some people hang out in the corona of a star and other people on frozen rocks, and they completely change their physiology and their biochemistry and their technology and their culture to adapt to their new circumstances. And maybe when they bump into each other, some of them get along and some of them fight. Maybe some eat each other. Some become more advanced, some become less advanced. I think all of those things can happen at the same time. It doesn't have to be one trajectory. It can be a multitude of branching trajectories all happening. The same way that one bacteria's destiny wasn't one destiny, it was many destinies. Does that make sense? Yeah. Sure. Yeah, yeah. How do you avoid the clickbait, right? Yeah. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to trust your BS meter a lot, right? Because so there's hope, right? We always want hope for a new technology, a new warp drive that's going to come out, something that's going to save us, something that I'm going to be able to get my hands on in 5 years, and it's going to make my life better. If it's really, really slinging like hope, like be careful, all right? The universe is not always so kind. The other thing is, does it fit in a motif of other things, other technologies that I've been hearing coming out? The next one I would say is look for where the publication's coming from. So you want to start to get a sense of who is just spewing nonsense and who is a reputable source for science. So if it's coming out of Nature magazine, if it's coming out of Scientific American, if it's coming from MIT, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, any of the major research universities, coming from major pharmaceuticals, not that they're blameless, but they are playing in science. Just sometimes they're just like, no, nobody got hurt. What are you talking about, right? But they do, like, those pills relieve pain. They just, death is a type of pain relief, I guess. But the point is, you want to look at the source and the people that are working on it. What are their credentials? How much of their life have they poured into this? Does it fit with what I'm seeing around here? And then you can always find and ask experts. Scientific nerds are lonely people. They want friends. Make some friends and just run it by them. Be like, hey, sniff test this for me. Is this real or is this nonsense? And the other thing is, one breakthrough. So when I was in grad school, a big headline that came out was that they discovered that a neutrino, which is a tiny particle, traveled faster than the speed of light. And everybody in the graduate school department was buzzing about this headline. This very reputable group had released this result and said, we found a neutrino travel faster than the speed of light. And we're like, that's not supposed to be possible. And most people said, we'll wait and see. And we waited about a month, and it turned out they had a loose cable in their device. So they did this whole thing, and there was a loose cable, and nope, sorry about that. There's another one where they thought they saw the fingerprints from superstring theory on the cosmos. Turned out to just be dust in the galaxy that was messing with the light signal. So the other thing is repeatability. So one person makes a big claim. You want to look for other people backing up that claim. Because one big claim that doesn't get backed up by other people is a red herring. It happens all the time in science. Scientists have to be free to state what they've discovered, to say what they've seen. Those people, the neutrino people, didn't do anything wrong. They did what they were supposed to do, and then they double-checked. And the bad scientists are the ones who would never admit that the cable was loose. The good scientists are the ones who then go back and say, is that really what happened? I need to make sure, because somebody else is going to try to copy my work if it really is so revolutionary. And I want to be the first one to point out, oh, no, my bad, loose cable. They have egg on their face for a month. We all forget it, but that's the ethical thing to do. So you want to look for repeatability. You want to look for a community of people talking about it. You want to look at what have those people been spending their lives doing, and you want to find some friends in the community. And also, you can just email the authors. These people are not that famous, and they're not that busy. If you just email them or email some other author about it, they'll get back to you, and they'll talk to you about what's going on. A lot of times they'll send you the paper for free. They love to talk about this stuff. So ask. Yeah. That's probably true. You should see how much homework I assign, though. Got to do the homework. It's how you train, right? Mm-hmm. No idea. Could have been. Honestly, I can't rule it out. I don't know. To the extent that it would be man-made, it would be there's a slight difference. If it was made in a Wuhan lab, like what I assume you're alluding to, it would be based on it'd be like a modified, like tricked up, like with a spoiler and dropping putting rims on it and stuff. Like it would be a regular virus that we tricked out. It wouldn't be something that was concocted wholesale like a sorcerer from nothing. Whereas the coronavirus vaccine is actually concocted from basically abiotic materials. That's sort of the difference. It's one thing to take something that already exists, like a natural coronavirus, and morph it into something else. And it's another thing to conjure something like a golem from the ancient tales, like from nothing. And the coronavirus vaccine is very much simpler than the coronavirus. The virus can replicate. The vaccine cannot replicate. We don't. If we knew how to do that, somebody would publish it, get a Nobel Prize, and be sitting on an island being famous, and other people would be using it for nefarious ends. So we would know if we were able to make synthetic life out of nothing. We can't do that yet, but we can modify existing life forms. And yes, we can make. It is entirely within the realm of the now scientific possibilities to make a virus like the coronavirus or make one worse. I have when the virus first came out, and you find out about the Wuhan virus lab in Wuhan, where the Wuhan virus came from, or the coronavirus came from. Like the suspicion is a natural thing to have, and I am not yet satisfied that we have completely solved that mystery. But I am not an expert in the field, so I'm not saying definitely was, definitely wasn't, but it is not a crazy person's mentality to think it could have been. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's most likely what they would do. Okay, so a little story about this. I'm wandering way off of the beaten path here, but when I was in the lab, there's really strict export rules for biological materials back and forth between China and the United States. And at one point, we wanted what's called a plasmid. It's basically just a ring of DNA that encodes a certain feature, and if you can stick it inside a bacteria, the bacteria will cook up whatever's on that plasmid. And this is how they make Tylenol, basically. They just have a bacteria with a little extra piece of DNA, and the bacteria is just going through its day, just like, what do you do for a living? You guys watch Rick and Morty, the I make butter joke, right? This thing's like, I make Tylenol. Like, that's what it does, and that's how they make Tylenol. So we wanted a plasma from this lab in China, and so we asked them for it. And at one point, they sent us a package in the mail. We open it up, and it's a Chinese instruction for a piece of equipment that we don't have, right? It's just in a manual. It's just a manual in Chinese for some, I don't know, incubator or something that we didn't have in our lab. What is this? And somebody bothered to flip through the pages, and like the Shawshank Redemption, they cut a hole out of the book and stuck the little vial with the plasma in there, and that's how they got past the export controls. So sometimes people are pretty loosey-goosey with the rules. Now, that plasmid was no danger to anybody. I'll tell you that, but that doesn't mean that things that are danger to people don't get the same kind of stick it in the book and smuggle it through customs level of treatment, or just you're supposed to go into the lab and you have to wash off and stand in front of the UV light, whatever you're supposed to do, and nobody's enforcing it. Somebody once said corporate culture is what you can get away with. So if they didn't have strict, rigid safety protocols in that lab, it doesn't even have to be nefarious. It could just be some lazy guy didn't wash his hands when he left the lab, went sneezed on an old lady in the marketplace, and presto. Like, it doesn't take much in terms of being lax on safety protocols when you're dealing with human pathogens. I don't know how it would have happened, but that is a possibility. Yeah. We're going to talk about coronavirus. I'm not an expert on coronavirus, guys. All right. Go ahead. Okay, why would you mess with a virus? This one I can actually answer. So there are a lot of things that when new viruses come up, whether we make them or not, this is a fact of nature. Nature can, every year in the ocean, every 24 hours, 1/3 of the bacteria in the ocean die from viral infections called bacterial phages. And then they grow back because bacteria grow fast, and then they're killed by bacterial phages. And every time that's happening, bacteria are in an arms race against viruses to figure out, the virus is like, how do I infect the bacteria and replicate myself? And the bacteria is like, how do I prevent the virus from doing this? It's a constant arms race that's happening in nature all the time. And so when we're looking at viruses and we're creating these human viruses, what we're doing is we're trying to get ahead of the virus. We're trying to say, what proteins, what markers in a virus make it likely to be able to jump skin, make it likely to be able to get past this particular protein defense that we have? And if we did, what could we do to that system in order to block it? So the white hat version of why obviously the black hat is to make weapons and kill everybody, right? But the white hat version of what would be the logic behind this is to try to figure out what bag of tricks do viruses have to get through our defenses and make us sick, and what would we need to do, like how would we build a vaccine in order to prevent the virus from doing that? And that's exactly what the coronavirus is attempting to do, is to teach our cells. The way I like to look at it is, if you get, like, let's say you're playing a video game and you get to a boss, and the boss has like a blinking red light on its eye, and you're fighting it, and you're whacking it on the side and in its arms, and you're getting your butt kicked, but you beat the virus. And at the end, you're like, your health is low and you're out of potions, but like the virus is dead, right? So you're like, yeah, I beat it, like natural. Then you go online and you look up like a tutorial on how to beat it, and it's like, just shoot it 3 times in the eye with the white arrows, and you're like, oh, come on, right? You go back to fight it again, boom, 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 you take it down. The vaccine is designed to teach you the secret to beating the virus, so that your body's immune response is a lot more like shooting it in the red dot with the white arrows than just flailing at it and hoping for the best. And the way they know where the blinking red dot is because they've done the research on human tissues and made these monsters in a lab, so to speak. And that's why they would do it, because otherwise we have no clue how to fight the virus when it finally comes out. So that's the white hat logic. I'm not going to go too far down the conspiracy theory stuff on the other side of this. Yep. They evolve. You can watch them evolve in a lab for like over 8 hours. You can literally give them like do an experiment where you watch them literally evolve over the course of a couple of days. Yeah.
This is not scientific, Sean, but when you said the two Earths thing, like, I had to say something because I'm writing a script about this. This is not scientific, and this is not proven, just letting you guys know. It's just something that I feel like in my soul. But we're always like exploring outwards to space, and you're talking about maybe two Earths are here somewhere or something like that in a parallel world. I personally have felt like that is true. I know some people say like fifth dimension or whatever. I feel like because we've been exploring out so long, like we haven't really dug into the Earth or explored too much of what is in the core or anything like that. So I have a hypothesis that just like if everything reflects everything, if we're supposed to go inside to listen to our voice, I have a theory that like we should go inside the Earth to find the new Earth. So I feel like it's some kind of dimension maybe we haven't unlocked, but certain people do unlock the more you get to know yourself, and it's almost like a little wormhole where you could start like astral projecting and stuff. But I think the new Earth is or another Earth is already kind of here. I feel like it's just a state of mind and in like a just deep inside somewhere. So that's what I like to say. My own theory. Okay. That was way different.
We're good? Any other questions? I can also stick around if people want to just talk after the event. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It was a lot of fun. I'm glad you guys came out. My pleasure.
Thank you.